You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond our usual stomping grounds. Not going to talk VIX or Tesla or SPY options or any of that crazy stuff here on the Crypto Rundown. Instead, going to talk the Bitcoin, the ETH, the volume, the volatility, the SKEW, the OI, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. The hot positions. What are people trading out there? Let's find out. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever scintillating Options Insider Radio Network. Welcome to all of you who've joined us recently here on this program and indeed on the network. A special tip of the cap to all of you who've taken the plunge on the pro side. It's a fun journey. I think you're going to like it. I certainly have been having a ball out there with all the Q&As and everything else going on out there. I've been learning a ton just from seeing what you folks ask. All of these various people, we're bringing on all the best minds in the world of options and derivatives for you folks to pick their brains on. It's literally a kind of a one of its kind opportunity. So take advantage of it. You can learn more at theoptionsinsider.com/secret club, because it's kind of a secret club. We don't really beat the drum about it too much, except here at the top of the show. We let you know about it out there. And of course, however you listen, live after the fact, hit us up. Questions, comments, insights, pearls of wisdom, and joy. We do love to hear from all of you folks out there. Let's see who we're hearing from on the program today. You know what? It's just me. No hot seat this week. A bit of a just the facts, ma'am edition. You know, it's post-holiday. Hard to drag people kicking and screaming. Everyone's still traveling and getting back in from the holidays. So straight to business as we go right into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown, which is exactly what it sounds like in the title, the portion of the show we break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. That is the old BTC, the big dog Bitcoin. And coming into showtime, it's a little bit bigger than it was this time last week. We were at about a 56,500 on our last show. And coming into today's show, we were a little bit north of 58,000, 58,100. Puts it up about 1,500 handles or so from this time last week. So not a ton, but not nothing either. All the bulls will be thankful for that after that continued sell-off from the mid to high 60,000 range we saw not too long ago. Any upside is welcome to them. We actually saw a low of about 53,300 or so. That was back on just yesterday on Sunday. So it was a more dire week. We have regained and recovered some of that. Of course, a lot of that driven by the big sell-off just across the board on Friday. And, this kind of just goes once again to reinforce this notion. Everyone's out there, crypto, should it be the non-correlated portion of my portfolio? And you certainly, if you're interested and you listen to a show like this, you certainly probably want to think about allocating to it. But is it this completely uncorrelated asset class? I think we have all discovered by now that that is not the case, particularly with the big dog Bitcoin. When folks are racing to the exits, when people are liquidating across the board, guess what? A lot of the same funds that hold your Teslas and your VIXs and your SPYs also hold some Bitcoin these days. So when they're liquidating everything across the board. And we saw Bitcoin sell off last week as well. So it's just one of these things to bear in mind on these crazy days when you might need that lack of diversification the most is when Bitcoin is the most correlated. It's the old adage, and it has proven true time and again in Bitcoin now. When it all hits the fan, correlation tends to go to one. You don't believe me? Look back at some of the big days over the course of the past year and a half. Look back at the big sell-off in March of 2020. Guess what Bitcoin did? Sold off about 30-odd% intraday. So it's not exactly this thing you can just rely on for complete and total non-correlation to your other assets. It is going to play ball with them. So how you deal with that and what portion of your portfolio allocate towards it is interesting. We had Russell on just last week, and he was talking about a very small allocation to Bitcoin. And it was enough to actually make a material. I think it was only 1%. So it's very small. And it was enough to make a material difference. Of course, now that's over the past year and change when Bitcoin's had a huge move. If it's not doing that sort of huge move, can it still make that much of an impact? I guess this is the time to find out. But something to bear in mind, everyone out there is thinking, you're going to swap your T-bills with your Bitcoin. Not quite the same thing. Let's go on out now. Look at the vol. Remember, all these analytics coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. Where do you go to find more? Kick the tires for yourselves. You know where to go. GVOL, GVOL.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you want analytics for Bitcoin options and volatility and SKEW, all the stuff we talk about here on the show, you want to see where we get those numbers from? GVOL.io is literally one of the only games in town to get those kind of analytics. So kick the tires and light the fires for yourselves. If you like these kinds of analytics and you're listening to a show like this, so you probably do, then that's one of the few places you can actually get them. So it's not like equity analytics where you can kind of go to a lot of different places and get some sort of vague approximation of that. In the crypto space, they are few and far between. So it might behoove you to check them out over there. If you did so, you would see that right now, the kind of the average at the money vol, they look at the vol surface and take a nice average snapshot of it. And it's about a 78% out there in Bitcoin right now. It's down a little bit from our last show. It was at about an 81% last program. Of course, a friend, Mr. Simon Ho, has been on the show multiple times of late. He runs T3 Index, has created spikes, also created a few Bitcoin-oriented products, including BitVol, which is effectively a Bitcoin VIX. That's down a little bit as well. In fact, on our last show, we saw BitVol at about a 93.75 2 weeks ago. Last week, about almost an 88, 87, 85. Coming at today's show, dropping again down to about an 84, actually an 83.95 out there. So a pretty big move out there in BitVol. Speaking of big moves, let's go to the SKEW really quickly, because last week we had a pretty big drop in BitSKEW, which is Simon's SKEW rating. Went from 80.75 down to 71.75, down 9 points, which is big and also surprising because the range pretty much before that, throughout most of the year, the low had been about 77 and the high had been about 95. So about an 18-point range throughout most of the year. So to see such a big 9-point drop and through the previous floor, that was kind of surprising. So Simon wrote in to kind of explain why that was. He says the drop in BitSKEW was caused by an increase in SKEW for the December expiry. I think we could all probably reasonably intuit that. He said its skewness coefficient jumped from 2.45 to 390 from Nov 21st to Nov 22nd, despite Bitcoin losing approximately $2,000 worth of value in that time frame. Bitcoin calls remained to bid. The strike range for the December SKEW calculation ranged from 16,000 to 400,000 due to increased implied volatility out there. So that's kind of how they calculate those numbers. And that's one of the mysteries we saw, because OI hadn't really changed much in the Bitcoin put options, and yet we saw the SKEW just dramatically swing. Coming into this week, looking at the 30-20 SKEW out there on GVol, we have seen a bit of an increase out there. Last week was about negative 3.8. This week, even more negative, negative 5.5. Remember, we said for a while now it's going to take maybe a bit of a protracted sell-off in Bitcoin to kick those puts back into high gear. Perhaps we're going to start seeing that. Let's see what we're seeing from an overall open interest perspective. Remember, November going off the board. November rolling off the board pretty much right now. So November took some size with it. About 45,000 contracts were open in November as of our show last week. Obviously, some more got on the board between then and expiration. So it took nearly 50,000 contracts with it out there. That means our overall OI is going to change a little bit in Bitcoin options on Deribit. The OI now for the calls, again, calls still roughly 2-to-1 over puts, but down a bit from last show. Calls about 121,800 open right now on Deribit. It's down about 15,200 from this time last week. The puts at about 64,400 open. That's actually up slightly, up about 2,100. So despite the fact that November is off the board, the puts are ticking up. So that's intriguing out there. Looking at where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective right now, again, November would have been number 2, but it went the way of the dodo, took about 45,000 contracts with it. So now December is kind of alone at the top of the roost with 101,000 contracts. That's down about 2,300. So actually losing a little bit from this time last week. And we saw March ticking up. It's about 24,300. It's up about 1,300 contracts from this time last week. Still a very distant number 2. And then to go to number 3, you get so distant, it's not even worth talking about. So Dece, it's pretty much all Dece all the time. And March in the rearview mirror, far behind it. And then nothing else really even close yet. So it looks like December is going to rule the roost for a while through the end of the year. Then we'll see beyond that what starts kicking into high gear. Maybe January will start exploding on the radar of everyone. We shall see. Let's see what's going on from a size position perspective. Where are you folks lining up? What are the big open positions right now in Bitcoin options over there on Deribit? Well, it's the par strike still leading the dance. 100,000 strike has 15,000 contracts open. It's down about 2,000 from this time last week. So obviously some November taken away with the expiration there. Number 2 is actually the 120 strikes, a little bit of a change up in our top 5 this week. That has 11,000 contracts open. It's actually up 1,000 from this time last week. So moving into the number 2 slot. It was lower. I believe it was 4 last week. Number 3, the 80,000 strike. It has about 9,900 contracts open. That's actually down about 2,100 from this time last week. Number 4, the 200,000 strike. Now we're getting up there. 8,600 contracts open. It's up about a few hundred from this time last week. And number 5 is the 70,000 strike with 7,900 contracts open. It's actually down 3,100. So you can probably reasonably intuit within that a lot of Nove coming off the board in the 70,000 strike, as well as the par strike up there and the 80,000 strike. So a little bit of a reshuffling of the deck in the top 5, even if the overall strikes haven't changed. The order has changed out there. Let's see what's changing from an overall OI perspective, the notional value of that OI. And as we said, November has gone the way of the dodo. So you could reasonably assume that a lot of the notional value that was open on our last show is now gone, and that is indeed the case. There was about 12 billion worth of notional OI open on Deribit last show. If you add in everything else, a little bit north of 13 billion. That's, of course, your CMEs, your Ledger X's, and everything else. Coming into today's show, a lot less, about 10 billion open on Deribit, talking around 11 billion if you add in everything else out there as well. By the way, number 2 right now is actually Ledger X, 359 million. That's a very distant number 2, but still number 2, followed by CME's number 3 at 272 million. Number 4 is Bit.com, 249 million. Number 5, OKEX, 232 million out there. So interesting stuff. Let's see what's going on from volume perspective. We're going to start making up what we lost over the course of the past week. I mean, we have seen some movement in Bitcoin. Did that translate to a lot of paper? And the answer is actually yes. Another strong week. We had another 1.3 billion worth of notional day. And today a pretty active day as well. Remember, we saw everyone was spooked about Omicron, or they were jokingly calling it Unicron on our Option Block show earlier today. But Omicron was spooking everybody. And the question was, would the sell-off continue coming into today? And the markets, at least on the equity side, are rallying. The most major cryptos are rallying today. In fact, we're seeing big moves, nearly 6% to the upside in Bitcoin, 7% to the upside in ETH. Solana up 9% just today. XRP up 6%. Cardano up 7.25%. So big moves out there across the board. And that has translated into a pretty strong volume week. Today, already coming into showtime, we had $1 billion worth of notional volume changing hands today. So good chance today might beat the 26. So again, another pretty active week and similar numbers to what we've seen the last couple of weeks, 1.3, 1.1, 1.2 billion going up over the last couple of weeks. We're kind of hanging out in that ballpark again, which is, again, it's not 3 billion like it has been in the past, but it's not nothing either. So it's somewhere between the 3 billion upside and the 100 to 200 million lows we were seeing back in July this year as well. So pretty active stuff, all things considered. Let's see if that action has translated over to CME as well. The Bitcoin options actually looking pretty good. OI is up to about nearly 1,600 contracts. And we saw about 225 or so trading on Friday, which was the last big trading day out there, which again, isn't a ton, but for this product, if you've been listening to this show for a while, there are days that can do 5 contracts. So 223 on a given day is a lot. And the OI up to 15, nearly 1,600, also quite a bit. Futures, same story. The OI ticking up a bit as well, up 1,100 contracts from this time last week to about 15,400, about 16,000 trading on Friday. So a pretty active day on Friday. Actually, weirdly enough, 16,000 exactly trading on Friday, which is strange. You don't usually see those types of round numbers. The micro Bitcoin futures, where you guys would probably be trading if you're slinging those up there, also ticking up out there. The OI was 34,400 last week. This week, 41,300. So quite the upside move there. Nearly 7,000 contracts gained out there in terms of OI. So a pretty strong week out there from a micro Bitcoin futures front as well. And we saw about 42,000 going up on Friday. So another active day. So you folks are piling in to the micros out there. As we keep on rolling, let's see if you're piling into the altcoin universe as well.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we break down what the heck is lighting up the dance out there. Let's start with the top 10. In fact, they've done it again. Our producers have expanded the top 10 to be a top 12 this week, listeners, because number 12 is Ye Old Shiba Inu. It's up 14.8% today, so a good day today, and about 24.25 billion worth of OI, still net down quite a bit over the course of the past few weeks. Number 11, Avalanche. Remember, this is the one that John Pearlstone was talking about from Crypto Patterns out there. At about a 116, now up nearly 11% today. Good day for them. And at about 25.8 billion. So that's outside the top 10. Now we get to the actual top 10. Number 10 is good old Doge, holding firm at about 28.5 billion, even though it's down to about 21.5 cents right now. So a wee bit lower than it has been in the past. Number 9, Polkadot, 36.3 billion. Number 8, USD Coin, 38.5 billion. Number 7, XRP, 46.25 billion. Number 6, it's Cardano, 53.5 billion. Number 5, it's Solana. Looks like it briefly broke through the 200 level. Back up north of it now, 208.5 coming into showtime. 63.25 billion worth of market cap. Then we got number 4. We got Tether, 73.1 billion. Number 3, Binance Coin, 103.6 billion. Numero 2, we got ETH, 523 billion. And the big dog, Bitcoin, a little bit bigger again this week, 1.1 trillion with a T worth of market cap. Let's get on out to the one a lot of you like to pay attention to. That is ETH. Coming into today's show, 4,400. So recovering quite a bit from its nadir, which was last Friday. It broke 4,000 to the dark side, 39.30 out there. Also saw a high on Thanksgiving, ironically. So crypto, no rest for the wicked, no holiday break for them. 45.53 is what it got to on Thanksgiving. We're obviously lower than that right now, still 4,400, but quite the recovery from the lows of 3,900 earlier, or I should say later last week. Now let's get on out to Just the Facts, ma'am. You guys can find the same analytics over there, gvol.io. Just switch from Deribit current order book over there to the ETH current order book in Deribit, and you'll see the vol coming in a bit. It was at 104%, so it had ticked back up on our last show. In fact, if you go back about 2 weeks, you'll see we've done pretty much a round trip of nothing. So we had about a 94% 2 weeks ago, ticked up to 104, back down to 94 again today. So a brief resurgence of ETH vol, now coming back off the top of that. The 30-20 SKEW, so that's all of the options. Remember, listeners, from the 30 delta down to the 20 delta. If that confuses you, check out our Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook radio shows to learn more. We had about a negative 2.5 on our last show. Coming into today's show, about a negative 0.3. OI, same deal as with Bitcoin. Nove rolling off the board, taking a lot of paper with it. The calls are down to about 1.04 million, down about 70,000. Again, kind of a reverse of last week. I think we were up 70,000 last week. So you go back 2 weeks and we pretty much unched from an OI perspective. Puts at about 452,000, actually up 14,000. So puts starting to tick up, still 2.5 or so to 1 below the calls out there. So it still is all calls all the time in ETH as well. Notional value of that OI obviously ticking down this week. It was 7 billion open last week. This week, about 6 billion. You don't need me to explain that to you again. You know, Nove went off the board, took a lot of paper with it. In terms of the action we saw this week, pretty heavy. We saw $1 billion worth of notional changing hands on the 26th, or close to it, 940 million or so, but pretty much flirting with that 1B level. And we saw about 610 million on Thanksgiving. So a pretty active holiday day and a pretty active middle of the week and a decently active day today. We were closing in on 500 million as of showtime out there today as well. In terms of where you folks are lining up, as I mentioned, Nove going off the board, took with it 276,000 contracts is what it took with it. So that's a lot of paper. Nove off the board, 276,000 contracts as of our last show. Of course, more were open since then. So a lot of paper going the way of the dodo this week in ETH. That means DECE is firmly in the number one spot, 661,000 contracts. Ticking up this week, up about 29,000 contracts. Number 2 is March with 366,000 contracts, opens up about 13,000. Again, same thing as Bitcoin. Nothing else is even remotely close. It's all quarterlies, all decent, all March, all the time right now in ETH. In terms of the strikes, what are the top positions out there? What are you folks actually trading? What do you have on out there in ETH options? Let's find out. Let's go reverse of the way we went in Bitcoin. I start at the bottom. Number 5, the 3,000 strike. So pretty firmly in the money. It hasn't been on our radar in a while, but it is this week. I think Nove going off the board has shaken things up here as well. The 3,000 strike, 62,000 contracts open. That's a newcomer to the top 5, as like I said. Number 4, the 6K strike, 74,000 contracts open there. It's actually down 13,000. In fact, most of our top 5 are down from this time last week. Number 3, the 10,000 strike, 97,000 contracts open, so we're ticking up a bit more now. That's down about 3,000 from this time last week. Number 2 is the 5,000 strike. It has 101,000 contracts open. It's down about 12,000. And number 1, the only really stalwart in our top 5 to gain some OI this week, is the 15,000 strike. It's up about 4,000 contracts to 113,000. So clearly some paper in DECE on the 15,000 strike, DECE and beyond. Wow, that's interesting. I would not have expected the 15,000 strike to be gaining so much paper this week, but that's where we find ourselves this week. In terms of the futures over there at CME, decent week. OI is up to about nearly 5,500. So that's ticking up about 200 from this time last week. And the most recent trading day out there doing almost double that, nearly 10,000 on the tape on Friday. So a pretty active day for ETH on the futures front. Of course, we are approaching that much anticipated launch date, December 6th, for the micro ETH future. So that'll be interesting to see what kind of impact that has on the overall volume as we keep on rolling throughout the altcoin universe. XRP, everyone's favorite / least favorite out there. Coming into today's show was below $1. It was 97.7 cents. It was $1.03 on our last show, so off about a little over 5 cents since this time last week. XRP, I know a lot of you like it. I like to watch it as well, but it's a tough one for a lot of you because, the SEC injunction effectively against it means most of you can't access it. So it's a fun one to watch, but right now it's pretty much theoretical for most of you out there. A Dogecoin, speaking of theoretical, any value to Dogecoin is probably theoretical, but lest I irritate Mr. Musk, we'll keep rolling. Dogecoin at about 21.6 cents. There was a glitch. You saw that back and forth with the Binance folks, I believe it was last week, where Musk said, hey, this glitch in Dogecoin looks kind of shady. And they said, hey, what's up with this glitch in your Tesla cars? So it was a fun little back and forth there. Of course, the Tesla glitch could actually kill people. The Dogecoin one could bankrupt people, but at least they'll still be alive. 21.6 cents on last show, 21.7 cents. Not a huge change in good old Doge net on the week. Same deal for Litecoin. It was at about 206.30 on our last show, 206.87 coming into today's show. So again, about $0.50, not a huge swing in Litecoin either. Cardano last week was $1.77. This week, $1.60. So actually net down on the week about 17 cents. Polkadot, same deal. 39.25 is where it was On last week's show, 36 and about a half was where it was this time last week. So not quite $3, but close to it, about 280 or so. On the dark side for Polkadot, Solana, 217 last week, 207 on our show coming into today's show. So off about 10 and a half bucks. That one's been on quite the wild ride of late. Where will it go next? We shall find out. And everyone's favorite, Shiba, has actually close to unched on the week. So not a huge change net in Shiba, even though it has been swinging wildly day to day. But before we roll out of here, let's answer some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Let's get to it. Mr. Z, first off, he says, can you please give us an overview of the trends, trades, and overall activity in the BITO options right now? How does it compare to what you see on Deribit and other exchanges? Thank you very much. Well, you're welcome, Mr. Z. We aim to please here on the Crypto Rundown. We know BITO and its ilk are very much on the radar of a lot of you out there. Obviously, BITO a wee bit lower than it was on our show last week. You can see where BITO is trading. I keep calling it BITO. BITO is trading right now, later portion of the show. We're at about 37, up about $2.50 or about 7.5% today. Of course, over the past week, we got down as low as 34.44 on Friday, listeners. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier about this correlation when it all hits the fan. And yeah, that's pretty much what you saw. It was trading on Wednesday, 36.70, and then it sold off to about 34.44 on Friday before rebounding again today. So again, kind of moving in lockstep with the equity markets right now. In terms of what we're seeing out there from an options perspective, it has been a pretty active name, and that remains the case right now. The ADV on BITO options is nearly 70,000, 68,000. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty active contract out there. In terms of what we're seeing from an OI perspective, let's dig into a little bit. Because you asked so nicely, Mr. Z, we'll do a little bit of a compare and contrast. We just broke down the top positions on Deribit. Let's see what the top positions are out here in BITO. Let's do a top 10 out here. The number one contract, by the way, the top 10 open positions in BITO options, 70-30 calls over puts. That pretty much is close to in line with what we're seeing on Deribit. Obviously in Deribit, the top 5 is all calls. And that's pretty much the case in BITO as well. The top 5 are all calls. If you expand it to a top 10, you got 3 puts sneaking in there. We'll do a quick top 5 here for you, Mr. Z. 24,400 of the DS45s is the number one open position in all of BITO options right now. So those are obviously going the way of the dodo in a few weeks. 45 strike could easily see that given what we were seeing today. We also have number 2, 16,000 of the DS60s. Can we see a 60? That might be a little bit more of a challenge out there. But number 2, number 3, 9,000 of the DS50s. Number 4, 8,300 of the DS44s. And number 5 here, so this would be our top 5, would be 8,300 of the DS54s. So 44s and 54s, number 4 and number 5. That's interesting. Number 6, we got the DS40, 7,300. Number 7, our first put here, we got 6,800 of the DS35 puts. Number 8, 6,000 of the March 60 puts, 6 O's. So those are substantially in the money now, which is interesting. Number 9, 6,000 of the March 60 calls. So that could be, they line up almost exactly, 6,050 and 6,041. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a conversion reversal going up there, aka a synthetic long or short Bitcoin or BITO in this purpose here. That's interesting. Number 10, we have the March 40 puts, about 5,600. Again, total of 378,000 contracts outstanding there. So that's nothing to sneeze at out there. And then the overall OI, it's 261,000 calls and 117,000 puts. So it still is roughly 2 to 1, a little more than that out there in BITO right now. So it's kind of similar to what we're seeing out there in Deribit. Like we said, what we just saw in Deribit, the par strike was number 1. Here we have the 45 strike. So not quite as optimistic. Number 2, we have the 60 strike. That's a little bit more optimistic. You're talking nearly doubling. Number 2, we have the 120,000 strike. So if anything, the size OI on Deribit is more wildly optimistic just from a pure strike perspective out there than it is on BITO. BITO seems a little bit more reasonable. We have 50 strikes and 45 strikes and 60 strikes, which again, 60 strike is a little bit out there versus the par strikes and 120 strikes, which are substantial moves involved on Deribit out there. What else do we have? Let's see. Vol-wise, they line up almost exactly the same. Vol-wise, we have BITO vol 78%. And today we had vol on the Deribit about 78%. So vol-wise, we're seeing the exact same beast out there. The 30-day implied vol SKEW out there on BITO options is about a negative 5.3. What did I say it was here? About negative 5.5 on Deribit. So again, very similar from those overall perspectives. So vol-wise, SKEW-wise, similar beasts. OI trends, very similar as well. Maybe the one difference being they're not quite as outlandish in terms of strikes in the BITO as they are in Deribit, but give it time. BITO's only been around for not that long, not less than a month. So we got some time for this to kick in. But so far, what we're seeing is very analogous paper. And you would expect that. You would expect to see a lot of flow back and forth between these products at the end of the day because they do trade the futures. So there is a lot to watch and keep an eye on. They're also keep an eye on the drag. It seems like it's less than people had expected after the initial launch. So that's a good sign for all of you out there who want to buy and hold BITO. Probably won't cost you as much as anticipated from a drag perspective, which is a good thing. So a lot to unpack here, but so far lining up pretty close to each other, which is kind of interesting. Before we go, let's go out to the Secret Club here. We got Frank listening live. He says, I don't have any crypto yet, but he's interested in getting some. He's been listening to Crypto Rundown for a while now, getting lured to the dark side. He says, what should I get? A lot of people chiming in our chat saying ETH. They were joking about Shiba, but really ETH. And I can kind of get behind the ETH recommendation. If you do want to pick up any of these, and again, there's a lot to keep people away from the crypto space as well. I get it. Just go look at Uncle Mike and our option block shows if you need to hear the Contra case for crypto. But there are no fundamentals in most of them outside of some products and projects like ETH, which there is some underlying utility there that can be converted into a value. Whereas Bitcoin, it's literally what the next guy will pay for it. The next guy is going to pay 30 cents. Then you're out quite a bit. So I could see there being a lot of hesitancy in Bitcoin. But an ETH is an interesting one. Of course, it has had quite the rally right now of late as well there, Frank. So it has rallied just over the course of this past year from, somewhere around 1,700, a little bit below that, all the way up to, where it is now, north of 4,000. So it's quite the run. So do you want to dive whole hog into ETH right now? That would be like saying, do I want to dive fully into the S&P after this massive rally and just keep riding it? It certainly can't continue to rally. So maybe a little bit of some nibblers here or there might be worthwhile. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, there's been some interesting ancillary products that are related to ETH or perhaps ETH competitors they have had rallies of their own. Look at Solana. They've had big moves as well. So it's hard to argue that those are cheap either. But from a net price perspective, they're not $4,500. They won't cost you the same amount to buy a one lot of those as it will in ETH. So at least from an overall positioning perspective, you can maybe put on a little bit larger positions out there without having to put the extreme outlay that may be required for ETH. But I can certainly see an argument for ETH being a good one to take to the bank here. We have a Mr. Unlimited in the chat saying Shiba is like taking the Lions to win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years. It's probably not going to happen, but it's fun to have hope. And if it happens, the payout would be huge. ETH is like taking the Packers. The payout is good, and it's probably going to happen. Well, a little bit of a bias there, I do believe. He is a Packers fan, but I get what you're putting down there. I like the analogy, Mr. Yu. All right, everybody, that music means we have to draw to a close this Just the Facts edition. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, if you're in the Secret Club, join us tomorrow. Mr. Gramza himself holding court on all things futures and futures options. If there's any complex, any one at all, I've yet to come across one where this guy can't speak at length about. So you want to talk crypto, he can certainly do that. If you want to talk energy, they've been moving quite a bit. Crude, nat gas, all that fun stuff. Metals, certainly a corollary to the crypto discussion. You can have that with him as well. Ags, fluid, milk, whatever the heck floats your boat. Mr. Gramza will be there to answer your questions about it tomorrow on our Pro Q&A session. Also getting a taste of the Oracle of New Hampshire tomorrow. He'll be joining us for the advisors option. So a double dose of live programming tomorrow. Don't miss it. Wednesday, back with your Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. 2 shows that a lot of listeners of this show should be checking out if you are in any way confused by any of these terms we're throwing around out here, like SKEW and vol and OI, all these things we're talking about all the time. Check out our options educational programs here. And of course, all the rest of the programming we have throughout the week. I'm back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io.